Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing this morning? Thank you. Is it up? Do you know if it's upstairs or?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just coming right now. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
See you. Sean Duffy.
How you doing? Thanks for the stamp follow. Yeah, no problem.
See you guys. How's it going? Good. We'll get started here in a second. Just quick say hi. How you doing? Sean, good to see you. How's it going? Sean Duffy. Settle up the horses and
I just had a few, not much for notes, but we talked about the geothermal, talked about it, that's kind of a Thorpe is the unit that's 25 years.
I'm sorry?
You work with Sean?
No.
Civil engineering, and the military could probably do that. Did he have a
what's that? Well, not too much. Handshakes actually.
I don't work with anyone. I'm with the DPW, so I'm just here to watch.
Department of Workforce?
No. It's with the Democratic Party of Wisconsin.
Is he a Democrat?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, the meeting's open to the public though, so I thought I'd come by.
Thank you for coming. You're Carrie? You're Carrie? Okay. I'm Matthew Grabowski.
I'm sorry?
I'm Matthew Grabowski.
Oh,
So,
nice to meet you.
thank you for what you're doing.
How's everybody doing? I appreciate you coming in and joining us for our town hall. We sorry, I'm a couple minutes late getting in. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk to you for like 8-10 minutes on a few issues that I want to chat about, mostly the economy and jobs. But then after that, open it up to questions from all of you, whether it's on what I'm talking about or whether it's on some other topic that you have. And I think, you know, as we go through it, we're lucky enough to have our moderator who will kind of set the rules of how that's going to go. And actually, do we have?
Yep.
Could we start with the? Can we start? Okay.
My name is Randy Reed. I'm the city administrator here in Thorpe, and they asked me to come and help moderate the meeting today. But before we get too far into this, I'm going to introduce Dan Pleva, who's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And so then we'll do is we'll start off now, and then I'll turn it back over to you, and we'll go through questions and answers. So does that sound okay? I can chat with you for 8-10 minutes, and then I'll turn it back over to you.
Do we have a choice?
Well, if you disagree and want to do something else, let me know. You always have choices. All right. Just quickly want to talk about what we've done in the last year. We have some papers that we passed out, but I had made a commitment to doing a town hall in every county. We have 20 counties in the 7th district. I did that. Also did almost 20 coffees with your congressman, it's a mini town hall. It's just over a cup of coffee instead of without any coffee. We did 150 mobile office stops. So if you know, we have a main office in Superior, another office in Wausau, but there's a lot of small communities in between, and we want to make sure we're bringing our congressional services to every community in the 7th district. So we have a mobile office that brings those services to all the communities. And we just have a handout to show you where we've been and the events that we've done. And that doesn't include all of the meetings and visits that we do throughout the communities. So we've been active. I think it's important to make sure we have a conversation, that I'm able to hear from you, you're able to hear from me. But if I don't stop and listen to where you're all coming from, I don't think I'm as effective of a congressman as I can be. So that's why I think it's important to do these. First, I want to talk about the economy and jobs. You know, we know we've obviously had a downturn, and frankly, it's been a pretty significant downturn, and we're not rebounding as quickly as many of us would like. We've been in this slump for far too long. Many of you are aware, obviously during the downturn, we had unemployment go up to 10%. That's the red line, the national unemployment, and it's now been coming down over the past several months. It's going in a positive direction. Unemployment is decreasing. The blue line is the Wisconsin state unemployment number. So Wisconsin is doing a little bit better than the country as a whole. But if you look at those numbers, they're pretty painful in our communities. A lack of opportunity, and a lack of jobs. Well, what I think is important, this is my point, yeah, okay, point. So what we have here is a red line that shows the national unemployment number. Yellow is the Wisconsin number. And what I think is important to note is, what is the real unemployment number? And when they calculate unemployment, they don't calculate people who aren't looking for a job. And we know that in this economy, in other economies, people get frustrated. They lose hope and they stop looking. And though you may want to work, but you've been so discouraged that you stop looking, you're not included in the unemployment numbers. And so if you actually add those people back in, you have an unemployment rate in real terms at about 16%. And that's why I think this feels so painful, because so many people aren't even included because they've lost that hope and they've stopped looking for a job. What's unique in this recession as compared to other recessions? If you look at historical data with regard to recessions, you'll see they're symmetrical. And what I mean by that is, if you have a V-shaped decline, you'll have a V-shaped recovery. If you have a U-shaped decline, you'll have a U-shaped recovery. They're symmetrical. The declines will usually match the recovery. V-shaped decline, V-shaped recovery. And these are all the charted recessions going back to World War II. In this recession, it's been different. We've had a V-shaped and steep decline, but instead of a V-shaped recovery, we've had a little pop, and it, for the most part, is flatline. All right, it's been different than other recoveries. If it had gone like previous recoveries, we would be very close to full employment right now. Obviously, that's not happening. This is just a little closer shot. You can see that they are symmetrical. This hasn't. This recession in the red line hasn't matched prior recessions. I think we have different philosophies going on right now. We have some who would say, listen, a philosophy for improving our economy is one that says you can grow your economy through increasing your government spending. You can increase your regulations. You can have more government control. And if you do that, you'll see more economic growth. And then you have another philosophy that says, listen, the free market, free enterprise is a way that you grow your economy. You turn it back to the people. Let the people, with a limited role of government, let them drive the economy and drive the recovery. If you recall, do you guys remember the stimulus package, stimulus bill? Nearly $1 trillion in government spending. This was going to lead us to an economic recovery. And if you recall, when the stimulus bill was enacted, the president came out with projections of what would happen with regard to unemployment. They said it wouldn't go above 8%, and it would actually start to rapidly decline, the unemployment number. And those projections weren't met. Actually, it went well beyond 8%, up to 10%, and then has remained stubbornly high. And if you look at the president's projections of a recovery, it would match what we would traditionally see in a recovery, right? I mean, that's what we should, what the president projected is what would traditionally have happened in this recovery, and it didn't happen. And I guess I would suggest to you that we've also done things very differently in this recession than we've done in other recessions. I know that we have some folks who are a little older than I am here today. Do you remember that we've ever done a stimulus package to the tune of $1 trillion in your history? I've never heard of that in the history books that I've read. No. I think you've seen an onslaught of new regulations that have come from Washington, like we haven't seen before. You have a healthcare reform bill that you haven't seen the likes of that massive legislation in our history. I think you add these things together. You have the threats of new taxes increasing. You put regulations and taxes, and the stimulus bill, the president's healthcare reform bill. All of that comes together in massive legislation that I think has caused this lack of recovery. And I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit more as we go through. I think if we're going to recover, we have to make sure that we're competitive. And like no other time in our history, we compete against everyone else in the world. We don't compete against now Minnesota and Michigan. We compete against China, India, Mexico, Vietnam. And we have to make sure that we have an environment in America that makes us incredibly competitive with these other countries. And I would tell you that I think we have the best workforce in the world, hardest working, most productive, and best educated. And the bottom line is, it's not the workforce that's causing the issues. I think it's the policies that come from Washington. I think that there's an attack on our Wisconsin way of life. I think if you look at what we do, how do we make a living in this area? We make things. Now, some of you might farm, but others, we manufacture here. We have a great manufacturing base. And the policies that are coming from Washington are making it far more difficult for us to manufacture and compete, which is how we survive, how we support our families, how we put roofs over our heads. We need policies from Washington that are going to actually make it easier for us to be more competitive, to expand and grow and create jobs. And I don't think that's happening. I think there's truly an attack on our way of life. I think that's the change. So I would now say, listen, hopefully I'm within my 10 minutes, 8 minutes, maybe I went over a little bit, I apologize for that. If we can then turn it over, we'll start doing a little question and answer.
So the reason they asked me to come in and moderate today is because even if you're not a political junkie, over the last 12 months in Wisconsin and across the United States, you've seen that there's still exceedingly divergent opinions and political positions out there. If you're familiar with my work here at the city, I tell people all the time, we don't all have to agree, but we have to agree to disagree respectfully. So we want to just set a couple ground rules for the interchange with Congressman Duffy. The first one is, when someone is asking a question, we want to be respectful and let them ask their entire question. When Congressman Duffy answers, we want to give him the chance to answer completely, and everyone just be considerate of each other. So those are pretty simple ground rules. I think we all do that. We're good, polite people here in the Thorpe area and Clark County, so I don't think we're going to have any issues. I do have Congressman Duffy's bio, which I probably should have read before he got started, but I'll take just a minute to read that to you, and then we'll get started with the questions. So, Congressman Sean Duffy was born and raised in Hayward, Wisconsin. His great-great-grandfather was one of the state's early pioneers and laborer for the Northwestern Lumber Company. His great-grandfather, one of Hayward's founding settlers, was a sawyer for 27 years. Congressman Duffy has never strayed from his roots, becoming a nationally recognized professional lumberjack athlete. He's a two-time world champion in the 90-foot speed climb and a three-time champion in the 60-foot and an accomplished log roller. Sean has been a color commentator for ESPN's Great Outdoors Games, as well as Badger State Games honorary athlete. Takes pride in bringing national attention to the sport with vital roots in Wisconsin's proud history. The 10th of 11 siblings, Congressman Duffy worked his way through law school by performing in lumberjack shows and exhibitions across the state of Wisconsin and across the country. After graduating from law school, he practiced law for 2 years in Hayward before becoming a special prosecutor in Ashland, Wisconsin. Shortly thereafter, he became an acting assistant DA and later the district attorney of Ashland County. Congressman Duffy recently concluded 10 years of service to the people of Ashland County, as first as a special prosecutor and then as the district attorney. As district attorney, Congressman Duffy was recognized as an aggressive prosecutor with a trial success rate of over 90%. He is most proud of his dedication to prosecuting child sex crimes. Working together with the law enforcement, Congressman Duffy helped make Ashland County one of the first counties in the state to investigate and prosecute child internet sex crimes. Through the MTV show The Real World, Congressman Duffy met his wife, Rachel Campos Duffy, an Arizona native. Together they are the proud parents of 6 children: Avita, Jack, Lucia Balin, John Paul, Paloma, and Maria Victoria. Having experienced a quintessential small-town childhood, Congressman Duffy wants nothing less for his own family. He and his wife raise their children. They're surrounded by the idyllic beauty and solid values of northwestern Wisconsin. And of course, as soon as the Duffy children learn to walk, they are taught how to log roll. They have performed in log rolling exhibitions and competitions throughout the region. Congressman Duffy is committed to fighting for the values and ideals enshrined in our nation's Constitution, the principles of life, liberty, limited government, and personal responsibility. He will work on the Financial Services Committee to bring stability and security to our financial markets and to empower the American entrepreneur and unleash the potential of the private sector. So let's give Congressman Duffy a short round of applause. And in no particular order, we've got a question from Shirley Gebert from Dorchester on streamlining the executive branch and the State of the Union address.
That's me. Hi. Thank you for being out here today, and I just have a quick comment before I ask that question. First of all, I want to thank you for being at the March for Life. Earlier this week, I was watching it on TV, and I had actually commented to my dad, "Oh, I wonder if Sean Duffy was there." And not 10 minutes later, you got up to speak. And I really appreciate that you're out there standing up to our values, making yourself visible. And then, of course, shortly after that, you're at the State of the Union, and now finding out today you're here. And that's part of our representative government. You know, it's the way it works, and we appreciate that you work so hard doing what we need you to do. And which leads into my question in regards to the State of the Union address. I have to say it sent chills up my spine when I heard the president talking about wanting to streamline government up to the executive branch. And in my ears, what I heard is so that he has all the power to make all the decisions. And to me, that's a dictatorship, and it takes away our representative government, which is you being here, listening to us, hearing about what is important to us. And I guess, you know, I would just like to comment on that. You know, it's important that Congress has the power that it was given. And I see every day it being taken away, which takes our power as individuals here away.
So you piggyback on that point. Obviously, we all have gone to school and we learn, you know, you take civics and we know how our government works. I'm reading right now 1787. We're talking about the Constitutional Convention. And it's interesting, look at the debates of our founders and what they, what they discussed when they set up our Constitution. And it was imperative that we have checks and balances in our government. And they went to great lengths to make sure that there's checks and balances. And I could say one of my concerns, to your point, is if you look at the recent appointments to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Mr. Cadre, I listened to the meeting. I guess if I listened to the meeting, how they portray it, are you all aware of that there was recent appointments to the, okay. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a new agency, incredibly powerful, limited oversight from Congress, which gives me great concern. And there was some structural changes that the Senate wanted to have happen. I passed a bill in the House that has some structural changes to make sure it's more accountable. It actually works better for our local banks and credit unions instead of giving all the power to the bigger banks. But the president made an appointment, and some will say it was a recess appointment, right? You hear it's a recess. He made a recess appointment. Bush did that. Clinton did that. Reagan did that. Here's the problem. We weren't in recess. We were in a pro forma session, right? We gavelled in and gavelled out every 3 days. So we were in session. The the payroll tax extension that took place, remember that fight at the end of the year? It was crazy. That took place in a pro forma session. And the president made those appointments when we were in session. And he's supposed to get the advice and the consent of the Senate. And he didn't do it. It is a massive power grab that he did with that appointment. Looking back, Harry Reid effectively used the pro forma session to prevent George Bush and his nominations to the courts. He made Bush wildly mad. Bush was, incredibly angry at how this was working, that he couldn't get recess appointments. But guess what? Bush didn't make those appointments. He respected the Senate. The appointments weren't made because they didn't confirm them. We need checks and balances. And that is the one thing that really concerns me, that this power grab is taking place. And I think it's important that people stand up and say, if they see those things, they push back on it. I think our government works when you have people that respect the positions that they've been given, and the authority they've been given. They don't overreach it. So, I hear your concern.
Yeah, and as Congress, how do you even push back against that?
Yeah, I think on this there'll be a legal challenge. There'll be a legal challenge here. So,
Move on. Next we have George Pagel from Thorpe, and he wants to know why gas prices are higher if there's more oil in the U.S. George?
Yeah, that was my question. As you hear about, we're less dependent on oil. Over 50% of it U.S. now, supposedly what I just heard, true or not. Gas prices have never gone down. Yesterday's stock market was the highest in 7, 8, 9 years. Yet the oil price went up again. Barrels of oil, I don't know if that's makes sense, but
I think what we're seeing is it's still a globally traded, right? And so global supply and demand will move oil prices. And I think it's positive that we have American energy. And the president's talked about trying to open up more lands to explore more energy in America. And I hope that's not just rhetoric, and I hope it actually happens. But if you add more supply, you'll see prices come down. Because I think we're going to continue to see demand increase. We have to meet that same supply. And one of my main concerns when you look at that is, as we want to move to energy independence, you guys have heard of the Keystone Pipeline? Keystone Pipeline is a pipeline that's going to bring oil from Canada down to our Gulf, where we have our bigger refineries. It's going to breed far more energy independence for America. And if this pipeline is built, it's 20,000 immediate shovel-ready jobs, if you want to use that term. But there's 100,000 indirect jobs. And if you look at them, these aren't Wall Street jobs. These are good, hard-working American jobs that'll build that pipeline, and they're private sector jobs. And the Canadians have said, if you don't build that pipeline to purchase our oil, they're threatening to send it to the West Coast, where they'll send it to Asia. They'll sell it to China. This is stupid. Why wouldn't we take that oil? And to be clear, there are different pressures that the president has to deal with. There's an environmental caucus, but then the unions understand these are union jobs. Why wouldn't you, if you say I support jobs, I believe that we want to have American job growth, why wouldn't you build a pipeline? It's not just jobs, it's energy independence. Look, you guys have heard of the mine up in Ashland? The Ashland mine, those are great. Those are great Wisconsin jobs. Now, we want to make sure we do it in an environmentally safe way, but we don't get there until we have rules in place that will allow us to study it and make a decision. Who's saying yes to those jobs? Who's saying no to those jobs, if you look at the parties? Who's saying yes to the Keystone Pipeline, and who's saying no to the Keystone Pipeline? You can't say I'm for jobs, but then say no to mines and say no to the Keystone Pipeline. That's what makes, I get so frustrated at that. So I think, back to your original question, I think it's supply and demand. We have to increase our supply, and I think we do that by pursuing American energy. We'll stay in our.
We have Paul Kowinski from Owen. What, I'm sorry.
Kowinski.
Kowinski, I'm sorry.
Paul?
On geothermal energy.
Yeah. I started getting some discussion with your system. I think we ought to go out.
I don't do.
I didn't get all the points across there yet. Why don't you develop geothermal energy using heat exchangers in every house to generate their heating and air conditioning?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Thanks.
Take federal government money to develop really good units. There's good units out there right now. I have friends that are loggers and stuff. I'd rather than burn firewood, have geothermal heat including their houses. It's really efficient. There's a gentleman over here that's an engineer, says it doesn't work. But I've seen it work out here in the country. And if they put that in all over the country, it takes care of some of your energy problems. It would probably take government financing. You get scale of efficiency of scale of government financed it. If you put it in all over the place, I mean millions of, tens of millions of geothermal units. You can cool everybody's house in the country with it. It would do away with our dependence on foreign oil. And it really worked well in Western Europe. They're dependent on natural gas. And it's something we could develop in this country. You don't have to buy it from China.
So how would we do that? Just to encourage people to purchase
No,
geothermal systems, or-
it's expensive to put in right now. I've heard guys say it costs up to about $20,000. And about half the cost is the unit you have in your house. I talked to a guy in Owen that just put one in, it cost him $2,000 or $3,000. He's a refrigeration. He got his own compressor built, put together his own unit that's efficient, and he for less than $10,000, he had his whole unit installed. And rather than burning fuel oil, he could burn natural gas. It's still more efficient than.
But are you saying that the government, like, we do a second stimulus bill, and that's
No, not a stimulus, well, in a stimulus in a way, if they would finance the stuff. First, if, using research, you get a really good unit and buy them on a massive scale, you get the price of the refrigeration unit way down. And make it available to private installers to install it in the house, and make money available to the homeowners for a loan to install it. When they installed it, they would have, like say, a 10-year period to pay it back, and that payback would come out of the money they used to use for buying fuel oil.
Well, I would say this. I do believe. So I believe in energy independence. I believe that we have to pursue American energy sources, but we're not going to have that energy forever. And I do think we need to make sure we're investing in new energy sources and cleaner energy sources.
I don't think that it is clean. That's not the reason I want to do it.
I know you're not saying that, but I'm telling you what I think there as well, and I think you're right. My concern is this. You might think geothermal is great, and so your government will pick a winner and say geothermal. And someone else will say, well, listen, I like solar panels. And someone else might say they like, so I think you truly have to let the market work.
Solar doesn't work at night.
I agree with that.
And the wind doesn't blow all the time.
Right. Do you want to make a comment?
Well, right now, if you put in geothermal, you get a 30% tax credit that runs through 2016. And so you ought to check into this. And how much more help do you want?
But if you've got a loan on if you install it in your house, you got a loan to install it, and you have to pay it back, the government could put like a mechanics lien on your house. They would get paid back. If you sold your house, they would get paid back. It would, the net cost to the government on installing the damn things would be zero.
Yeah. But is it a financing problem now? Do you think people can't get the financing to put them in? I think
It would take financing to induce it on that larger scale.
Here's my concern. And I know you're not, I want to be very clear, I know you're not saying this to me, but I'm concerned because I hear not necessarily what you're saying, but what some others will say is, people go, I am so sick of bailouts, the bank bailouts, the car bailouts, I'm sick of all the bailouts. And then, I know, okay, go ahead.
It's not a bailout.
I know, no, I know.
It's an entirely new thing.
Yep. And I know that you're not saying, I know.
Talk to your assistant about a couple of the other things I told you, and then make a decision.
Absolutely, I'll agree with that. But what I think there's an interesting change that's going on in the culture as well. And when I ask, I agree with them when they say we shouldn't have any more bailouts. I'm like, that's why I actually ran. But then when I ask them, where they'll go, they're not mad about bailouts necessarily. They're mad who was bailed out, and they're saying they should have bailed me out. They should put someone said we should put solar panels on every American's house. When someone said, you should, all students that have loans, you should pay off all student loans for every American. I mean, you're starting to see this whole transition of thinking now in the country that says, I want, if my government's gonna engage in bailouts and handouts, well, of course it should be me. That's the problem when you go down this path of bailouts and handouts. All of a sudden we all say, let's have some of it. It does have to stop because it changed the site. And I know you're not saying that to me. I know you're not telling me that, so I'm clear on that. I know you're not asking for bailouts. But I think it's an interesting point, though, that there's this change, and I guess I'd like to our other generations. They might say, we weren't successful because my government gave me everything. We worked hard. We were personally responsible. That's how we got here.
Look what rural electrification did to this country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was the same thing. Basically, you ended up paying for it,
Yeah.
but it completely changed the way this country is right now. Modernized us. This would do the same thing.
I'll be happy to get some more information from you too. I'll be happy to look at it. I think we should move on to the next question.
All right, we have Joan Hendricks from Owen and wants to talk about Simpson Bowles and debt.
That's me. This debt has been worrying me for years, and it's just getting so totally out of hand. And several years ago, I asked your predecessor about it, and I got a lecture on the difference between debt and deficit, which I already knew the difference. But I'm just wondering why the Simpson Bowles committee, why their recommendations are not being considered, and whether you think that that they should be, because I think they should be. And my other question in relationship to that, and I know you won't like this question, but is your pledge to Grover Norquist forever, or just for a year, or for 2 years? Because I think we need to look at taxes increases and government spending cutbacks and try to get this in balance, because where we're headed is toward Greece, I think.
Can I take just a few minutes to talk about debt then? This is where we owe $15 trillion in debt. $15 trillion. You break that down, that's almost $50,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country. Okay? I have 6 kids and a wife. There's 8 in my family. And so if you're to apportion the national debt, that means my family would have $400,000 of our share of the national debt. And that includes my little 1.5-year-old. The debt is growing. The projections are at $1 trillion a year. Okay? We're going to borrow $1 trillion every year for the next 10 years and beyond. There's no end in sight. These are the projections of debt to GDP. So in World War II, you had debt that was 100% of GDP, where GDP is the size of our economy, the gross domestic product, right? That's how we measure it. We paid it down. We've had a blip, or more than a blip, in the last couple of years. But this is the projection of where we go in regard to debt to the size of our economy. You don't get to 300%. Your economy collapses well before you get there. But this is the trajectory that we're on. And so, at some point, people say, well, you should cut the military, right? You should cut these programs. You have this is where we spend our money, okay? Just quickly. So this is the pie chart of where money is spent in America. You have 60% is mandatory spending. Automatic spending just happens every year without us voting on it. You hit a certain age, you get your Social Security, you get your Medicare. We pay the debt. That just happens automatically. We don't vote on that every year. 40% is discretionary. We vote on that every year. That's discretionary spending, okay? So mandatory is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt, and other mandatory spending. Some VA spending will be in there. You get some food stamp spending in there. That's 60%. 40% can be divided into two charts. One is defense, which is about 20% of the budget, and non-defense discretionary spending is 20% of the budget. This is every agency you think of as government. DOJ, EPA, Health and Human Services, every agency in government falls in here, which is 20%. Today, we borrow 42 cents of every dollar we spend. We borrow 42 cents of every dollar we spend, okay? And so, if you wanted to balance the budget today, some would say cut the military. Okay. If you actually wipe out your military, zero military spending, you'd be halfway there balancing your budget. Halfway there. You'd have to cut out every agency you think of as government too, today. And you could then balance the budget. You could pay Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest, and this other mandatory spending. That's how bad it is. That's the problem that we face in the country. It's not a simple solution. Did anyone hear about the budget that we passed over the summer? The House proposal? You guys hear any comments about what that was? Your negative comments about it? Yeah.
Paul Ryan's bill, right?
Some will call it Paul Ryan's. It's the House budget actually, but
Yes,
you guys hear people call it extreme, radical? Do you know how long? So we cut. Cutting is reducing the size of growth in Washington talk. That's how bad. It's actually slowing the growth, not actually cutting spending, to be clear. When we say we cut spending, that means you reduce your spending levels, not in Washington. Cutting is reducing the growth of the outflows. So we reduce the projected spending levels over the course of 10 years by $6 trillion in this budget, right? We reform Medicare for future generations, not for those who are 55 and older. And if you want to talk about that later, I'd love to talk about it. And you heard crazy things said about this budget. Do you know how long it takes under that proposal to actually balance the U.S. budget? Not pay off the debt, just get it to balance. Do you know how long it takes? 40 years. In 2050, it would balance under that proposal. And guess how it's done? We use interest rates at today's levels, historic lows. You go to historic norms, doesn't even balance. That's how bad it is. And so if you want someone to come up with a plan that actually balances, you thought that was rough? Wait and see what you're going to find out what a budget really looks like that can bring us to balance. We have to have an American conversation on this issue. My position on taxes is this. When I was running, I told everyone where I was on taxes before I told Americans for tax reform. Everyone knows what I'm saying. Here's the deal. I don't believe that you will get there by taxing your way out. You can't tax your way out of this problem. You can grow your way out, and you guys have heard about there's a movement to increase taxes, right? You hear about we need to tax millionaires and billionaires and corporate jet owners and big oil companies, right? You guys heard that? Yeah, right? Who thinks we should do that? A few of you do, okay. Well, do you think the proposal is just for millionaires and billionaires? No. The president's talking about raising taxes for those who make $200,000 to $250,000 a year. Now that's a lot of money. Make no mistake, that's a lot of money. Okay?
You talk to us here, that's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But who are those people? Those people are the ones that will probably have a small business in the community. They'll have the small manufacturing firm in the community. Those are the people that we're saying, create jobs. Be competitive with China. Be competitive with India. I would consider your proposal to raise that, taxes. If you could just tell me, if we raised more taxes in America, okay, and we gave that money to Washington, and they could invest it more effectively than the people in our own communities to create jobs for us, like investing in companies like Solyndra, if you can sell me on that, maybe. But the way Washington works, do you think any of that increased revenue would go to pay off the debt? Is that dysfunctional town? Heck no, it won't. They'll spend it. They'll spend it. Here's what we need with regard to taxes. For generations, there have been lobbyists who've gone to Washington. Well, I was riding my trike when this was going on, and they carved themselves out of the tax code. They don't pay. How much does GE pay in taxes? Anyone know? Zero. So if you just say raise the rate of taxes, how much is GE going to pay? Zero, that's right. They're still not going to pay because of lobbyist loopholes. Lobbyist loopholes mean that there's a whole sector of the economy that don't pay their fair share.
How do you get them to it?
You reform the tax code. So, and that's where the movement should be. In our budget that we just talked about, we actually suggested just that. Take the loopholes out. Take the loopholes out. And you could take the top rate and bring it from 35% to 25%. Anyone in here a fan of Bill Clinton? Anyone like Bill? You like Bill Clinton? Yeah, all right, guy. Let's take a look at what Bill Clinton says. There's Bill. This was on July 3rd, 2011. This last July. When I was president, we raised the corporate income tax rates on corporations that made over $10 million a year. Saying I raised rates. It made sense when I did it. It doesn't make sense anymore. We've got an uncompetitive rate. We tax at 35% of income, although we only take in about 23%. So we should cut the rate to 25% or whatever's competitive and eliminate a lot of the deductions so that we still get a fair amount and there's not so much variations in what corporations pay. I agree with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's not saying raise rates. Bill Clinton is saying reduce the loopholes. Take the lobbyist loopholes away. I'm with him. Can I play the video? There's someone else I agree with too. Anyone think we're out of this recession yet? Still feels pretty tough, doesn't it? I would agree with that. There's another bipartisan effort that I'm going to... Who's this guy?
He says, explain how raising tax, evaluate this very carefully. Let me jump to another topic. Scott Ferguson, he's upset about taxes. He says, explain how raising taxes on anyone during a deep recession is going to help with the economy. And he actually wants you to look at historical markers where this has been, you say, where this has been a helpful thing.
Well,
out of a recession.
Well, first of all, he's right. Normally you don't raise taxes in a recession, which is why we haven't. And why we've instead cut taxes. So I guess what I'd say to Scott is, his economics are right. You don't raise taxes in a recession. We haven't raised taxes in a recession.
But you
We
might,
don't have
you might for the high for some of the low.
We have not proposed a tax hike for the wealthy that would take effect in the middle of a recession. Even the proposals that have come out of Congress, which, by the way, were different from the proposals
I'm sorry about that's not the way the president talks. I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with yeah, I'll fix that. But the point is, in recession, you don't raise taxes because it affects your ability to grow. Taking more money from the productive side of the economy and sending it to Washington, D.C., I've seen them there. They can't spend your money better than you. They can't. We have to grow. And we don't have a taxing problem. We have a spending problem. We are spending far more than we can afford. That is the issue. Cut out the loopholes. Make people pay their fair share, but raising rates. Can I just? I'm not spending too much time on this question. What is a fair amount for your government to take? What percent? Is it fair for your government to take 10% of your income? I think 10% is fair. All right. Who says 20% is fair? Okay. 20% is fair. Who says 30% is fair? Anyone say your government should take 40% of your money? Should your government take 50% of your money? How much should your government take from you? No matter how much. Whether your government now takes 35% federally. That doesn't include what they take on the state side. So we have to say, what isn't a fair amount to take from you? And I would say that's a good conversation we should have.
Your 35% is after all the loopholes and
That's
after
right.
you get down to adjusted income, and that's the, like you're saying, the loopholes are the
And
problem.
so if you have a big corporate lawyer and a great tax attorney, you can take advantage of that 10,000-page code. Most of us, we pay the rate. That's where we get it.
We should move on.
Yeah,
to the
sorry.
next question.
I
We got
got
Matt
very much
Kurowski's
like this.
report on union rates.
How do you feel about workers' rights?
I love workers' rights. You know what? That's why I'm fighting to make sure there's jobs for folks up in the mine and asphalt.
Do you support the Fair Labor Act?
You know what? Here's my position. If people want to unionize, they want to come together and form a union, I'm all right with that. I don't have an issue with that. If they don't want to, though, I don't think they should be forced to either. I think there's a good balance when labor is balanced with management. That's a good thing. If you have lopsided, management far more powerful than labor, or labor far more powerful than management, you get into problems. But no, listen, people want to form a union, so be it.
So you think we should follow Germany's lead on labor management?
What is Germany's lead?
Every company over 20 employees has to have a union. Every company with over 100 employees has to have a union member representative on the board of directors.
Hell no, I don't. You want to know why?
Germany's
Because
the strongest
you know what I believe?
industrial nation in the world right now, though.
We are the land of the free. And if you want to form a union, great. But if you don't want to form a union, why do I want to force anybody to join a union if they don't want to join? Why would I do that?
Because workers' rights is
Listen.
with the corporate board, and to make sure that everybody is treated equally. You don't have CEOs making 25,000 times what the frontline workers are making. I mean, you've got somebody that has to raise a family, 4 kids, making $7.50 an hour at one end. And then at the other end, you got the CEO that's making $300 million a year. Where's the fairness in that?
Well, you asked me about whether I should mandate that people have to join a union. And I'm telling you, I don't believe that. I believe that if everyone in their own heart says, I want to join or I don't want to join, they should be able to make that decision. Who am I, as a federal representative, to mandate that you have to join a union? You may go, I don't want to join a union. I don't want to. And you may want to. This is a free country. I'm not going to tell you what you have to do. If you want to assemble and do it, and great. If you don't, you might go, my company treats me great. I don't need to form a union. Or you might go, they treat me horribly. I want to form a union. Listen, not going to be it. So,
I'm sorry, is Wisconsin a right to work state?
No.
I didn't think it was.
No.
It's going to be though.
Huh?
It's going to be.
It should be.
It should be.
Next one. Okay, Jeff Frank Great from Stanley, and he wants to talk about oil pipeline economy and disorganization in your office.
Shoot.
Okay.
That's a lot.
The crude oil that comes here from Canada, that's used between Pennsylvania and Wyoming, is the same crude oil that they want to send to the Gulf. The reason for sending it to the Gulf is so that we can refine it and ship it overseas right from the Gulf. In addition to that, it's already been published that if we do build the Keystone Pipeline, gasoline prices in this area are going to increase by 35 to 40 cents a gallon, 35 to 40 cents a gallon, because that crude isn't going to come here, it's going to go to the Gulf. The economy in September of this past year, 11, the Congressional Budget Office said that if we had continued Bill Clinton's tax policies, we would have zero debt. We would have been out of debt. But we didn't do that. We have $200